The snow fell heavily over the Alaskan mountains. Through the thick clouds above, a massive ship broke through Earth's atmosphere. Its dark metal hull gleamed against the white landscape below. Commander Du Jin of the Galactic Confederation stood on his command bridge, looking down at the planet with narrow eyes. "Sir, we're picking up multiple heat signatures in Sector 7, reported his sensor officer. They appear to be human military units. Du Jin walked closer to the main screen. He had studied humans for months before this first contact mission. In his opinion, they were barely more than savages who had stumbled upon spaceflight. The fact that they were required to make peaceful contact with such primitives annoyed him greatly. "Magnify the image," he ordered. The screen showed 20 human soldiers moving through the snow. They carried long weapons and wore white camouflage suits. Some lay in the snow, while others moved in practiced formations. "They're conducting military exercises right when we're scheduled for first contact." Du Jin's face turned red with anger. This is a deliberate insult. His second-in-command, Officer Yonghe, stepped forward carefully. "Sir, they might not be aware of our exact arrival time. The diplomatic protocols suggest we should." "Silence," Du Jin snapped. "I will not be made a fool of by these primitives. They dare to display their primitive weapons when we arrive. Then we shall teach them proper respect." "Sir, that would violate at least 7 regulations regarding first contact procedures," Yonghe said, trying to keep his voice steady. Du Jin ignored him. "Deploy the capture teams. I want those soldiers arrested and brought aboard. Let's see how brave they are when faced with real power." "Commander," Yonghe tried one last time. "Please reconsider. This could have serious diplomatic." "Are you questioning my orders?" Du Jin turned to face him fully. "Need I remind you of what happened to my last second-in-command?" Yonghe fell silent and bowed slightly. "No, sir. Deploying capture teams now." On the snowy ground below, Staff Sergeant James Miller watched the alien ship through his scope. His team had been training for winter warfare when the massive vessel appeared. Now they lay still in their positions, waiting for orders from command. "Control, this is Echo 7, Miller whispered into his radio. "We have eyes on the vessel. Please advise." Only static answered him. The alien ship must be blocking their communications. "Hansol," Miller called quietly to his spotter. "What do you make of this?" Master Sergeant Hansol kept his binoculars trained on the ship, those panels opening on the sides. "They're launching something. Small craft, coming in fast." Miller was about to order his team to fall back when bright blue lights suddenly surrounded them. The light grew stronger, and he felt a strange tingling sensation. His last thought before everything went dark was that this definitely wasn't part of the training exercise. When Miller opened his eyes again, he found himself in a stark white room. The walls were smooth metal, and a strange humming filled the air. His weapons and gear were gone, replaced by a plain gray jumpsuit. Through a transparent wall, he could see other members of his team in similar cells. An alien voice spoke through hidden speakers in broken English. "You are now prisoners of the Galactic Confederation. Your primitive display of force will not be tolerated. Prepare for transport to a permanent detention facility." Miller caught Hansol's eye in the cell across from his. They shared a slight nod. Neither man showed any fear or anger. Their training was too good for that. Instead, they began doing what they did best: observing, analyzing, and waiting for the right moment. Commander Du Jin watched the prisoners through surveillance cameras. "See how docile they become when faced with superior technology. This is how you handle primitives." Officer Yonghe said nothing, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they had just made a terrible mistake. Something about the calm way the humans were behaving seemed off. They didn't act like frightened primitives at all. But Du Jin was already composing his report, proud of how he had handled Earth's first contact. He had no idea he had just arrested some of the most dangerous special operations soldiers on Earth, or what that mistake would cost him. The prison transport ship moved silently through space. Inside one of its holding cells, Staff Sergeant James Miller sat cross-legged on the floor, his back straight against the wall. His face showed no emotion as he counted the guard patrol patterns for the 5th time. In the cell next to him, Master Sergeant Hansol watched the aliens with careful eyes. As a Korean-American who had grown up speaking 2 languages, he found himself picking up bits and pieces of the alien speech. Their language had some patterns he recognized. "Miller," Hansol whispered when the guards were far enough away. "These aliens don't understand what we are." I heard them talking. "They think we're just regular infantry." Miller nodded slightly. "Good. Let them think that." The other members of their team were spread across different cells in the same block. Corporal Thompson, their youngest sniper, sat quietly reading the strange markings on his cell walls. Sergeant Rodriguez spent his time doing push-ups, while Sergeant Wilson appeared to be sleeping, but was actually memorizing the ship's vibration patterns. Captain Kita, the young prison transport commander, walked down the corridor with his security officer, Jae-yun. They stopped in front of Miller's cell. "These are the primitives who dared to challenge the Confederation." Kita laughed. "They don't look very impressive." Jae-yun studied the humans carefully. "Sir, I noticed something strange. They don't act like any prisoners I've transported before. Most new inmates pace, shout, or show signs of stress. These humans, they just watch." "That's because they've been broken by our superior technology," Kita said proudly. "Commander Du-jin was right to arrest them. This will teach their species proper respect." After they left, Hansol translated the conversation for Miller. Both men shared a small smile. Their team had spent years perfecting the art of patience. A sniper could lie motionless for days, waiting for the perfect shot. This was no different. Later that day, the ship's mess hall had an incident. 2 alien crews got into a fight over food rations. As the guards rushed to stop it, Miller's team watched with interest. "Distance to the nearest exit, 30 meters, Thompson whispered. "Guard response time, 45 seconds, Wilson added. "Blind spots in camera coverage near the food storage," Rodriguez noted. They weren't planning an escape. Not yet. They were doing what they were trained to do: gather intelligence, analyze weaknesses, and wait for the right moment. That evening, Jae-yun reviewed the security footage. She noticed how the humans always sat facing exits, how they seemed to track guard movements without being obvious about it, and how they communicated with subtle hand signals. "Captain," she reported to Kita, "I believe these prisoners are different from what we were told. Their behavior suggests military training beyond basic infantry." Kita waved her concerns away. "You worry too much, Jae-yun. They're just primitive soldiers. What harm could they do on a Confederation prison ship?" Hansol, meanwhile, had learned enough of the alien language to understand the ship's announcements. He heard them mention something about heading to a place called Maximum Security Station 5. "Sarge," he whispered to Miller, "they're taking us to their version of a supermax prison. Might make things more interesting." Miller just nodded. His mind was already working on the possibilities. In their training, they had learned that sometimes the most secure places had the biggest weaknesses. People got comfortable, made mistakes, let their guard down. That night, as the transport ship cruised through space, the human prisoners slept quietly in their cells. To the guards, they looked defeated and harmless. But each man dreamed of wind speeds, trajectory calculations, and the perfect shot. In his office, Captain Kita filed his report. Human prisoners showing complete compliance. No signs of resistance or combat capability. Recommends standard containment protocols at Station 5. How wrong he was. The galaxy's most dangerous human snipers weren't resisting. They were doing what they did best: observing, calculating, and waiting. Their chance would come. It always did. Maximum Security Station 5 floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal star. The prison transport ship docked smoothly in one of its many hangars. Captain Kita stood proudly as the human prisoners were led out in chains. "Welcome to your new home," he said with a smile. "You'll find escape is impossible. No one has ever broken out of Station 5. The station's walls were made of thick metal that could stop any weapon. Guard towers washed every corner, and security cameras covered every hallway. To Kita, it was the perfect prison. To Miller and his team, it was a new environment to study and understand." Officer Jai-yun walked beside Kita as they followed the prisoner transfer. "Sir, I've completed my report on the human's behavior during transport. There are several patterns that concern me." "More concerns, Jai-yun." Kita sighed. "You worry too much about these primitives. Look at them. They're completely under control." She looked at the humans walking in front of them. "That's just it, sir. They're too controlled. Normal prisoners show fear, anger, or at least confusion in a new environment. These humans are scanning everything, memorizing layouts." "You've been watching too many security videos," Kita laughed. "They're just walking. What else can they do in chains?" The human prisoners were split up and placed in different cell blocks. The aliens thought this would prevent them from planning anything together. They didn't know that snipers trained to work alone or in pairs. Being separated wasn't a problem. It was an opportunity. Han Sol found himself in a cell block with alien prisoners from different species. He listened to their conversations, learning more about the station's routine. Every piece of information could be useful later. Miller's cell had a small window that looked out into space. The guards thought he spent hours staring at the stars because he missed Earth. Really, he was calculating angles and distances, building a mental map of the station's exterior. In the station's control room, Kita met with his senior staff. These humans were arrested for conducting military exercises during first contact. "Commander Du Jin wants us to show them how powerless they are compared to the Confederation." One of his officers spoke up. "Sir, what kind of military exercises were they conducting?" "Does it matter?" Kite replied. "Primitive warfare is primitive warfare. They probably don't even understand how our simple door locks work." At that moment, Thompson was actually studying the door locks in his cell block. As a sniper, he knew that understanding how things worked was just as important as knowing how to shoot. He had already figured out 3 weaknesses in the locking system. Jai-yun spent her evening shift watching the security feeds. She noticed how Wilson always sat in the shadowy corner of his cell, how Rodriguez exercised at specific times to watch guard changes, and how Miller's window gazing followed precise patterns. She wrote another report. Request permission to increase security measures for human prisoners. Their behavior suggests specialized military training. Kate rejected her request without reading it. "Stop pestering me about the humans. Focus on the real threats, like the Meridian pirates we've been hearing about." That night, as the station's lights dimmed for sleep cycle, the human snipers lay quietly in their cells. Each one had spent the day doing what they did best: observing, measuring, and planning. They had already found 12 blind spots in the camera system, 5 weaknesses in the guard patrols, and 3 potential escape routes. In his comfortable office, Kita wrote in his log, "Human prisoners successfully contained. No special measures needed." Officer Jai-yun's concerns noted but dismissed as overcautious. He had no idea that his primitive prisoners had already learned more about his station's security flaws in one day than most prisoners discovered in years. The humans didn't need to escape yet. They were patient. They would wait for the perfect moment, just like they waited for the perfect shot. After all, that's what snipers did best. 1 week had passed since the humans arrived at Station 5. The prison's routine continued as normal until something unexpected happened in Cell Block D, far from where Miller and his team were held. A fight broke out between 2 large alien prisoners during mealtime. The guards rushed to stop it, but Miller, watching from his cell 3 blocks away, saw it coming before it started. He had noticed the angry looks, the tension in movements, and the way other prisoners had slowly moved away from that table. 10 seconds, Miller said quietly to himself. The fight spread exactly as he predicted. 3 more prisoners joined in, then 5 more. The guards were overwhelmed. In her security office, Jia-Yun noticed something strange on her monitors. All 5 human prisoners had moved to specific spots in their cells just before the riot started. Each had a clear view of different corridors. "Captain Kita," she called over the comm system, "please come to security immediately." When Kita arrived, Jia-Yun showed him the footage. "Sir, watch the humans. They knew the fight was coming. Look at their positions." "Nonsense," Kita said. "How could they possibly know?" "They're trained observers, sir. I think they saw the signs before our guards did. Look at their reaction when the alarm sounded." While other prisoners panicked or got excited, Miller and his team remained completely still. They watched the guard response time, noted which corridors were left unguarded, and saw which security doors malfunctioned under stress. Hansol, meanwhile, listened carefully to the guards' radio chatter. He now understood their language well enough to follow their emergency protocols. Every piece of information was valuable. "Sir," Jia-Yun pointed at her screen. "The human called Thompson. He's writing something." In his cell, Corporal Thompson was indeed writing. He marked down how long it took guards to reach different areas, which doors they bypassed, and which security cameras turned to follow the action. To anyone watching, it looked like he was just doodling to pass time. Sergeant Wilson, in his cell, noted how the guard patrols changed during the emergency. Sergeant Rodriguez counted how many guards responded and what weapons they carried. Each man gathered different pieces of the same puzzle. "Captain," Jia-Yun tried again. "These humans are studying us. They're learning our weaknesses." Kaita waved his hand dismissively. "They're just watching the excitement like all prisoners do. Stop seeing threats where none exist." But Jia-Yun wasn't convinced. She had spent hours studying footage of the humans. They didn't move like normal soldiers. They moved like hunters, always aware of their surroundings, always calculating. The riot was contained after 30 minutes. 2 guards were injured, and 3 prisoners were sent to medical. As things calmed down, Miller shared a quick glance with Hansol across the corridor. Both men had learned valuable information about the station's emergency response. That evening, Jia-Yun filed another report. Human prisoners display unusual tactical awareness. Request permission to investigate their military backgrounds. Keita read the first line and deleted the report. "These humans are making you paranoid, Jia-Yun. They're just primitive soldiers who got caught showing off their weapons. Nothing more." In his cell, Miller lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. In his mind, he went over everything he had learned from the riot. His team now knew the guard response times, the weak points in security, and the blind spots in the camera system. It was all fitting together like pieces of a puzzle. "Patience," he whispered to himself. "Wait for the perfect shot." Outside his cell, life in Station 5 returned to normal. The guards relaxed, thinking they had handled the situation well. They never realized that the real danger wasn't in the riot. It was in the quiet observers who watched their every move, waiting for the right moment to strike. The warning sirens of Station 5 blared through every corridor. Red emergency lights flashed as guards ran to their positions. Captain Kite rushed to the control room, his face pale with worry. "Report," he shouted as he entered. "Sir, 3 Meridian warships just appeared from hyperspace," an officer answered. "They're not responding to our calls." The Meridians were space pirates who attacked prison stations to free their captured members. They were known for their violence and their advanced weapons. "Sound the lockdown alarm," Kite ordered. "Move all prisoners to secure cells." In his cell, Miller heard the sirens and felt the station's shields power up. He shared a quick look with Hansol across the hallway. They had been waiting for something like this. "Sir," Jia-Yun spoke up from her security station, "we should keep the human prisoners together. Separating them might be dangerous." Keita laughed despite the serious situation. "Dangerous? They're our least threatening prisoners. Move them to the lower levels. We need the secure cells for the dangerous inmates." As guards came to move them, Miller and his team didn't resist. They walked calmly, memorizing every turn and door they passed. The guards thought they were being cooperative. Really, they were marking their targets. The first explosion rocked the station just as the humans reached the lower levels. The Meridians had blown a hole in the outer defenses. Alarms screamed through every speaker. "Hull breach in Section 8, someone shouted over the radio. "Meridian boarding parties have entered the station." Keitai ordered more guards to the breach point, leaving other areas of the station less protected. In the confusion, no one noticed when the power flickered in the lower levels for just 3 seconds. But Miller noticed. Thompson noticed. Wilson, Rodriguez, and Hansol all noticed. When the lights came back on, their handcuffs were already off, hidden under their clothes. The guard who was supposed to be watching them was too busy listening to radio reports about the Meridian attack. "Sir," Jai-Yun called to Kita, "we've lost camera feed in the lower levels. Deal with it later." Kita snapped, "We have pirates boarding the station." The Meridians moved through the station like angry hornets, shooting at guards and freeing their captured members. They thought they had surprised the station. They didn't know they were being watched by hidden eyes. Miller's team had split up, each man finding a perfect hiding spot. Thompson settled into a dark corner that covered 3 main corridors. Wilson positioned himself where he could see the main power controls. Rodriguez found a spot overlooking the docking bay. Hansol stayed mobile, listening to guard and Meridian communications. "Captain," Jai-Yun tried one last time. "The humans are loose in the lower levels. We need tow." A massive explosion cut off her words. The Meridians had blown up one of the station's power cores. As backup power kicked in, Kita finally realized his mistake. "Find those humans," he ordered. They cooled. Another explosion shook the station, but this one was different. It was smaller, more precise. A Meridian leader fell, a tiny hole in his helmet. 2 seconds later, another pirate dropped. "Impossible," Kita whispered as he watched his security feeds. "How are they doing this?" In his hidden position, Miller lined up another shot with his improvised weapon. The guards had thought the humans were helpless without their rifles. They didn't understand that anything could be a weapon in the right hands. Hansol's voice came softly through a stolen radio. "Station's main reactor is losing power. Guards are falling back to Sector 7. Meridians are splitting up." Miller smiled slightly. Everything was going according to plan. The pirates had given them the chaos they needed. Now it was time to show the galaxy why you should never underestimate human snipers. "Take the shot," he whispered to his team. "Make it count." Chaos ruled in Station 5. Meridian pirates ran through the corridors, shooting at guards and breaking open cell doors. But something was wrong with their raid. Their leaders kept disappearing. A Meridian commander led his team around a corner, then suddenly dropped to the floor. The small hole in his chest was so neat that his men didn't notice it for several seconds. By then, 2 more pirates had fallen, high above in a ventilation shaft. Corporal Thompson smiled slightly. He had made his improvised weapon from parts of his cell bed and some pipes. It wasn't as good as his usual rifle, but at this range, it didn't matter. The pirates never looked up. "Thompson, status." Miller's voice whispered through a stolen communication device. 7 targets down. No one has spotted my position." Thompson replied quietly. In another part of the station, Sergeant Wilson watched the main power control room through a crack in the wall. 4 Meridian engineers were trying to shut down the station's systems. Wilson had been a sniper long enough to know that patience was more important than speed. The lead engineer finally moved to the perfect spot. Wilson's shot went through a tiny gap in the wall panels. The engineer fell, and panic spread among the others. "Wilson here. Power room is clear," he reported. Captain Kita stared at his security screens in confusion. "How are they doing this? They don't have any weapons." "Sir," Jai-Yun pointed at a screen. "Look at the shot patterns. These aren't random attacks. They're precise kills from impossible angles. These humans, they're hunters. In the docking bay, Sergeant Rodriguez had turned a maintenance tunnel into a perfect hiding spot. He watched through a small hole as Meridian ships tried to dock. His improvised weapon may have been made from prison materials, but his aim was still perfect. "Pilot down in Ship 3, Rodriguez whispered. "They can't dock if they can't see where they're going." Hansol moved silently through the lower levels, gathering information. He heard the Meridians' panicked radio calls in their language. They couldn't understand why their people kept dying from shots they never saw coming. "Miller, they're falling back to Section 8, Hansol reported. "They think we have a whole army hiding in the walls." Miller lay perfectly still in his position above the main corridor. He had built his weapon carefully over the past week, using materials from his cell and things he found while being moved. Now he waited, just like he had waited so many times before in snowy mountains and dense forests. 3 more Meridian raiders ran below him. Miller took a slow, calm breath. His first shot hit the leader in the back of the head. Before the others could react, they were down too. "This is impossible," Kita shouted in the control room. "They're just primitive soldiers. How are they killing elite Meridian raiders?" Jai-Yun finally understood. "Sir, they're not just soldiers. Look at their shooting patterns, their positioning, their timing. They're snipers, elite marksmen trained to hunt from hidden positions." The Meridians started to retreat. What had begun as an easy raid on a prison station had turned into a nightmare. Their men were dying from shots they couldn't see, fired by enemies they couldn't find. "All teams fall back," the Meridian commander ordered. "This station is defended by ghosts." Miller watched through his makeshift scope as the pirates ran back to their ships. His team had turned the hunters into the hunted, using nothing but improvised weapons and years of training. "Sir," Jai-Yun said quietly to Kita, "I don't think these humans are the primitives we thought they were." Kita couldn't answer. He was too busy watching his security screens, where 5 humans with homemade weapons had just defeated an elite pirate raid force. In his hidden position, Miller allowed himself a small smile. The aliens had thought they were just simple soldiers. Now they were learning what it meant to face American snipers. Captain Kita stood in the station's main control room, watching the security recordings for the 5th time. On the screens, he could see how Miller's team had systematically taken down the Meridian raiders. Each shot was perfect. Each position was carefully chosen. "Play it again," he ordered, his voice shaking slightly. Jai-Yun stepped forward with a datapad. "Sir, I've analyzed their tactics. Look at how they positioned themselves." She pointed to the screen. "Thompson took the high ground here, covering 3 main corridors. Wilson chose a spot near vital systems. Rodriguez controlled the docking bay. These weren't random choices. The recording showed a Meridian leader walking down a corridor. Then, without warning, he fell. The camera angle made it seem impossible. There was no clear line of sight to any shooter. How did they make these shots?" Kite asked. "There were walls and barriers in the way. They found gaps we didn't know existed," Jai-Yun explained. "Tiny spaces between panels, small holes in the ventilation system. They spent their whole time here studying the station, finding these spots." In the holding cells where the humans were now kept under heavy guard, Miller sat quietly. His improvised weapon had been taken away, but he didn't seem to care. He had proven his point. Hansol was being questioned by station security. They wanted to know how the humans had made their weapons. "Simple materials," Hansol explained calmly. "Anything can be a weapon if you know how to use it. A sniper learns to work with what they have." The word sniper made the guards nervous. They had learned what it meant the hard way. In his office, Kita received a message from Commander Dujin, who had ordered the humans' arrest in the first place. "Explain how 5 primitive soldiers defeated an elite Meridian raid force," the message demanded. Kita didn't know how to respond. How could he explain that these primitive humans were actually highly trained specialists, that they had turned his prison into their hunting ground? Jai-Yun showed him more analysis. Sir, look at their preparation. They memorized guard patterns, found blind spots in our cameras, learned our emergency protocols. Everything they did was planned. The station's damage control teams were still fixing the destruction from the raid. But where the Meridians had caused chaos and destruction, the humans' attacks had been surgical and precise. Minimal damage, maximum effect. They could have escaped, Jai-Yun realized suddenly. During the raid, they had multiple chances, but they chose to defend the station instead. Kaita watched another recording. This one showed Miller taking down 3 raiders with 3 perfect shots, protecting a group of guards who didn't even know they were in danger. Why? Kita asked. Why defend the station that imprisoned them? Because they're soldiers, Jai-Yun answered. Real soldiers protect people, even their enemies, from greater threats. In their cells, Miller's team continued their quiet observation. They saw how the guards now looked at them with a mixture of fear and respect. They noticed the increased security, the nervous glances, the whispered conversations. Thompson smiled slightly as he heard guards talking about the impossible shots he had made. Wilson counted how many times security teams came to check the spots where they had hidden during the raid. Rodriguez watched as engineers tried to figure out how they had found gaps in the station's design. Hansel, with his understanding of the alien language, heard the new words they used to describe the humans. Ghost warriors, shadow hunters, invisible death. Kaita finally wrote his response to Commander Dujin. Sir, we made a serious mistake. These humans are not primitive soldiers. They are elite warriors called snipers, masters of precision warfare. We arrested them without understanding what they were. Now we know. In his cell, Miller lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. They had shown the aliens what human snipers could do with just basic materials and careful planning. But he knew this was just the beginning. The real changes would come when Earth learned about their arrest. The galaxy was about to learn a valuable lesson about underestimating humans. 3 days after the Meridian raid, a massive ship appeared near Station 5. It wasn't a Confederation vessel or a pirate ship. It was an Earth diplomatic ship, and it carried angry passengers. Sir, a station officer reported to Kita, the Earth ship is demanding the immediate release of their soldiers. They say the arrest was illegal under Galactic law. Kaita watched the Earth ship on his screen. It was smaller than Confederation ships, but looked well armed. Behind it, 2 more Earth ships waited at a distance. In the diplomatic meeting room, Kita faced the Earth representatives. A tall woman in a military uniform spoke first. I am General Sarah Chen of the United States Special Forces, she said firmly. Those men you arrested are part of an elite sniper unit. Their arrest during a peaceful training exercise violates 3 different galactic treaties. Commander Dujin, who had been called to the station, tried to defend his actions. They were displaying weapons during first contact. It was clearly an aggressive act. They were conducting winter warfare training in their own territory. General Chen replied coldly. Your ships appeared without warning during their exercise. Under galactic law, you had no right to arrest them. Jai-Yun showed them the security footage from the Meridian raid. The Earth representatives watched with pride as their soldiers defeated the pirates with improvised weapons. 47 confirmed targets, General Chen noted. All clean shots, minimal collateral damage, and they protected station personnel. Even as prisoners, they maintained their training and ethics. Dujin's face turned red. But they're primitive. How can they be so advanced in warfare? An Earth diplomat stepped forward. Commander, humanity has been practicing the art of precision warfare for centuries. What you call primitive is actually highly specialized training. Your mistake was assuming that different meant inferior. In their cells, Miller and his team waited calmly. They could hear the station's crew talking about the Earth ships. Some guards looked nervous, remembering how 5 humans with homemade weapons had saved the station. Hansel listened to the guards' conversations. They were sharing stories about the raid, about impossible shots and invisible attackers. The story was spreading through the Confederation. stories about human warriors who could kill from impossible distances without being seen. Keita reviewed the damage reports from the raid. The Meridians had caused massive destruction wherever they went, but the humans' attacks were surgical. No stray shots, no unnecessary damage, every target chosen for maximum effect. The humans didn't just defeat the raiders, Jai-Yun explained to the station's officers. They did it with perfect efficiency. Every shot had a purpose. Every position was chosen carefully. This is why they're elite warriors. The Earth representatives demanded more than just the release of their soldiers. They wanted a formal apology from the Confederation and new protocols for first contact situations. Your actions could have started a war, General Chen told Du Jin. You're fortunate our soldiers chose to protect your station instead of escaping. They showed more wisdom than you did. Du Jin's career was finished. His superiors were furious that he had nearly caused a diplomatic disaster and had revealed human military capabilities to the galaxy. Keita watched as Miller's team was formally released. The humans didn't show anger or seek revenge. They walked out with the same quiet confidence they had shown throughout their imprisonment. Captain, Miller said to Keita before leaving, your officer Jai-Yun has good instincts. She saw what others missed. That's a valuable trait. As the humans prepared to leave, stories about their actions spread through the station. Guards and prisoners whispered about the ghost warriors who had defeated the most feared pirates in the galaxy with improvised weapons. The Earth ships departed peacefully, but everyone knew things had changed. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humanity might be young among the stars, but they were far from primitive. In the station's records, Jai-Yun filed one final report about the human prisoners. She ended it with a simple warning: never underestimate human specialists. They see things others miss, and they never miss what they see. 6 months after the incident at Station 5, the Galactic Confederation's military academy looked very different. In a special training room, Master Sergeant Hansol stood before a group of alien officers. A sniper's greatest weapon isn't the rifle, he explained, pointing to a display showing the security footage from Station 5. It's patience, observation, and understanding your environment. The alien officers watched carefully. Many of them had requested this training after hearing about how 5 humans with improvised weapons had defeated an elite pirate raid force. In another part of the academy, Jai-Yun, now promoted to chief security instructor, taught a class about threat assessment. The Station 5 incident had earned her recognition for her careful observations of the human prisoners. Never judge a species by your own standards, she told her students. What looks primitive to you might be highly advanced in ways you don't understand. On Earth, Staff Sergeant Miller and his team had become legendary. Their actions had changed how the galaxy viewed human military capabilities. But today, they were back doing what they did best: training in the Alaskan mountains. Looks familiar, doesn't it? Thompson said, looking at the snowy landscape where they had been arrested 6 months ago. Miller nodded. The memory of their imprisonment had taught both humans and aliens valuable lessons. Now, Earth and Confederation ships ran joint patrols in this sector, watching for Meridian raiders. Captain Keita had also found a new purpose. After the incident, he requested a position as a liaison officer with Earth's military. He wanted to understand the humans better, to learn from his mistakes. Your warriors achieve more with improvised weapons than our forces do with advanced technology, Keita told the Human Military Council. We have much to learn from each other. The Meridian pirates had changed their tactics too. They now avoided any stations or ships that had human security forces. Stories about invisible snipers who never missed had spread through the galaxy's criminal underworld. In the Confederation's records, the Station 5 incident became required reading for all officers. They studied how the human snipers had turned their prison into a hunting ground, how they had protected the station instead of escaping. The humans showed us something important, a Confederation instructor told his class. True strength isn't about having the best weapons. It's about how you use what you have. Hansol's joint training program had become highly popular. Confederation officers competed for spots to learn human sniper techniques. They were amazed by how much skill it took to lay motionless for days, waiting for one perfect shot. Precision, Hans Saul taught them, is more powerful than brute force. One careful shot can do more than 1,000 random ones. Back in Alaska, Miller watched his team train alongside alien observers. The Confederation had learned to respect human military skills, and humans had learned more about their place in the galaxy. Hard to believe it all started with an arrest, Rodriguez said during a break in training. Miller looked at the alien ships now peacefully patrolling Earth's skies. Sometimes the best way to make friends is to show them what you can do. In Station 5, now a joint human-alien facility, a memorial plaque hung in the main corridor. It showed the security footage of 5 human snipers defending the station with improvised weapons. Below it were written words in both human and alien languages. Here, the galaxy learned that wisdom comes in many forms. True strength lies not in technology, but in skill, patience, and dedication. This lesson was taught by 5 humans who turned imprisonment into victory, and enemies into allies. Jai-Yun often stopped to read those words. She had been the first to see what others had missed. Now she made sure nobody would make the same mistake again. As the sun set over Earth, Miller's team continued their training. They knew that somewhere in the galaxy, their story was being told. A story about 5 human snipers who had taught the stars that humanity was ready for its place among them. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Never again would they mistake human specialization for primitive behavior. The age of new understanding had begun.